Christopher here. Now, you might think sharks' reputation would be enough to scare people away. Well, some people are stupid enough not to get it. From a drunk man in floodwater who decided a bull shark looked rideable, to a sailor on a life raft who thought grabbing a circling oceanic white tip by the tail would scare it off. But first we start with a 326-pound woman who tried to pet a great white shark. It was January 18, 2016, off the rocky shoreline of Gansbaai, South Africa, where a woman who had built her identity around a dangerous misunderstanding waded chest deep into water that had already been flagged as unsafe that morning. Maris Badenhorst, 43, weighed 326 pounds and ran a small Facebook group about astrology and sharks. She had no formal science education. Her expertise in marine behavior came from interpreting Mercury retrograde shadows and her self-proclaimed past life as a Polynesian shark deity. The premise was simple and wrong, that great white sharks, when approached calmly and without aggression, would respond in kind. She posted videos, infographics, and personal testimonials. 5 members had flown to South Africa specifically to witness what she had been promising them for months: a close, peaceful encounter with a great white in open water. The waters off Gansbaai are one of the highest density great white habitats on Earth. Adults in this region average 11 to 14 feet in length and can exceed 2,500 pounds. Great whites are not ambush predators by default. They investigate, they circle, they test. That behavior is not curiosity in any meaningful sense. It is a threat assessment. Local surfers had reported a large great white shark in the shallows that morning, likely attracted by increased fish activity near shore. One participant later told investigators she had asked Maris whether they should wait, but Maris replied that the shark's slow lateral passes were non-threatening behavior. The group entered waist-deep water, with Maris leading toward the area where the shark had last surfaced. The shark made 2 wide passes around them before closing the distance. When it came within about 8 feet, Maris turned toward the others, said something indistinct on the footage, and then faced the shark. She moved toward it through the chest-deep water and extended both arms. Her hands made contact with the shark's rostrum, the blunt cartilaginous tip of its snout, for approximately 1 second, but it was already a catastrophic mistake. The shark snapped laterally with the full torque of its head and neck and closed its jaws around her right forearm and elbow region. The shark shook its head twice in rapid succession. Most of the forearm was effectively removed, with extensive destruction extending proximally into the upper arm. The bite and tearing motion severed the brachial artery above the elbow, causing immediate massive arterial hemorrhage. Blood dispersed through the surf within seconds, a visible dark cloud that expanded faster than most witnesses expected. The shark released. It did not return. Maris was still upright, her right arm held slightly away from her body. She then collapsed forward into the breaking surf, her face entering the water as blood loss rapidly impaired consciousness. Her followers caught her and pulled her partially upright before she went under completely. Several were still holding their phones. 2 continued filming while 2 others tried to pull her through the break. But at 356 pounds, she was too heavy to move quickly. They struggled to lift her body dragging against the sand, the surf pulling at her legs. The delay cost precious minutes. A surfer on the beach called emergency services. Lifeguards reached her within about 4 minutes, but she was unresponsive by the time paramedics loaded her, roughly 9 minutes after the bite. She died from severe blood loss and drowning before reaching the clinic. The coroner reported near complete loss of her right forearm, a fractured radius, complete transection of the brachial artery above the elbow, and fatal exsanguination. The Facebook group was dissolved shortly after. Authorities seized and kept the footage. What stays with me isn't the shark. It's that she spent years convinced that biology bends for her belief. But in the end, biology was simple: 326 pounds on wet sand, and no one could lift her in time. Morris didn't survive the water that day, but she at least died believing in something misguided as it was. The next guy had no belief system to hide behind, just raw stupidity. It was February 22, 2015 in Rockhampton, Queensland, Australia, and the floodwater had been sitting in the streets long enough that people had stopped treating it like an emergency and started treating it like entertainment, which is the exact moment these situations stop being survivable for certain kinds of men. Jaylen Campbell was 28 years old and worked as a forklift mechanic at a depot outside the Rockhampton CBD. People said that he was good at his job, and everyone who knew him said so without being asked. What they also said, usually in the same breath, was that he had a specific kind of appetite for attention that his regular life couldn't quite feed. That floody day, he had spent the afternoon on a second-floor balcony at a friend's place on Bolsover Street, drinking beer and watching a dorsal fin move steadily between two partially submerged sedans below. By mid-afternoon, several neighbors had already seen it from their window. People described a large bull shark, estimated between 7 and 9 feet, moving through the flooded residential street with a kind of unhurried efficiency that animal behaviorists describe as active foraging posture. Bull sharks are the only shark species that can survive indefinitely in fresh water, a physiological trait that makes Queensland flood events a documented and recurring risk. Adults in that size range weigh between 200 and 300 pounds, carry a bite force exceeding 1,300 pounds per square inch, and are widely considered the most dangerous shark species in terms of confirmed human attack. They do not require deep water to operate. They require depth enough to move, which a flooded residential street provides without difficulty. Jaylen had been joking about riding it since early afternoon. His friends egged him on. The fin had been visible on and off for over an hour. None of that registered as a hard boundary for Jaylen. He stripped to his shorts around 4:20 p.m. and stepped off the balcony stairs into approximately 3.5 feet of brown debris-carrying floodwater. At least 4 neighbors were filming from elevated positions. The shark was spotted again, roughly 15 feet ahead of him, moving parallel to a partially submerged youth. Jaylen moved toward it in a low, waiting crouch, arms out for balance. The water was opaque enough that his legs disappeared below the knee. He closed to within arm's reach and placed both hands on the animal's dorsal surface. The shark reacted immediately, twisting away from the contact and disappearing beneath the surface. Jaylen stumbled backward from the displacement. The witnesses on the balcony said there was a pause, maybe 3 seconds of nothing, before the water directly beside him erupted. The bull shark turned beneath the surface and struck from Jaylen's right side, taking the upper right thigh and groin region in a single bite, the full jaw engagement of an animal that size, producing immediate catastrophic structural damage to the tissue. The femoral region contains the femoral artery, the femoral vein, and dense surrounding musculature, none of which are capable of withstanding bite force of that magnitude. Witnesses reported seeing the water churn violently before a dark discoloration spread through the floodwater around. He screamed once, loud enough that neighbors a full block over later told police they heard it. He tried to move toward a submerged sedan, got one hand on the roof, and went down. The shark returned briefly, made contact a second time, then moved off. Jaylen did not get up. A neighbor dialed emergency services within the first minute. Rescue crews arrived by boat at roughly 20 minutes after he entered the water. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner determined the cause of death to be exsanguination, resulting from traumatic shark-inflicted injuries to the femoral region. The funeral was held 3 days later. His friends from the balcony stood in the back and left before the service ended. This might be just me, but anyone who sees a bull shark in floodwater and jumps in anyway has removed themselves from the gene pool by their own hand. The next one is different, and in some ways harder to sit with because she thought it through. It was November 9, 2017, and the water at Mossel Bay was doing something it rarely does, pulling a crowd toward it instead of away. Zarya Patel was 22, a biochemistry student at the University of Toronto who had deferred her graduate school acceptance by a year to travel. She had been in South Africa for 6 weeks by then, working her way down the coast with a loose itinerary and a habit of documenting everything. Her mother later told journalists that Zarya had read about shark behavior specifically before the trip. I think that detail matters. She had arrived at Mossel Bay 2 days earlier, staying at a guest house near the point. She was scheduled to fly to Cape Town in 3 days and had already planned which beaches she would photograph there. She had told her friends traveling with her that Mossel Bay was underrated, that the light in the afternoon was better than anywhere she had been. That day, the baitfish had been pushed against the shore break since early morning. By 10:40 a.m., a juvenile great white, later estimated by marine officials at roughly 9 feet, had made several visible passes through the surf close enough that people on the beach could track it between waves. Juvenile great white sharks are regular presences in these near-shore zones, following prey into the shallows. Although they're smaller and less powerful than adults and primarily feed on fish and other relatively small prey, they can still inflict catastrophic injuries if a bite occurs. The word juvenile refers only to age. The crowd had grown to several dozen. 2 lifeguards on duty had been moving along the waterline for at least 20 minutes, telling people to step back, repeatedly ordering beachgoers out of the water, and keeping the immediate shoreline clear. One of them, a man named Dion, later said he had specifically told a group of young women near the water's edge to move back twice. The water was knee-deep where they were standing. He had likely assumed they complied. Zarya's friends stayed dry. She waded in. They saw her moving into ankle-deep, then knee-deep water while facing away from the ocean, phone raised. She was angling the shot to capture the shark's dorsal fin, breaking the surface in the background. The shark at that moment was between 15 and 20 feet from her position, visible, active, chasing a concentration of baitfish running parallel to the shore. She crouched slightly to adjust the frame. The water was to her knees. The shark pivoted hard during the chase. This is not unusual behavior. Juvenile great whites change direction explosively when prey scatters, and the baitfish had broken formation and scattered shoreward. As Zarya crouched lower to adjust her shot, a passing wave lifted against her legs and dropped her upper body closer to the surface. The animal came in fast and low, and its jaws closed on the left side of Zarya's face and neck before anyone on the beach had processed what was happening. She went straight backward into the surf. The shark released within seconds and moved off. Bystanders were in the water pulling her towards shore within 30 seconds of impact. The damage to her neck was severe enough that the lifeguards who reached her first recognized immediately that the airway was compromised. Dion applied direct pressure, but she was unresponsive by the time paramedics took over and died before the vehicle reached the hospital. The post-mortem examination listed cause of death as exsanguination and traumatic airway disruption secondary to a single shark bite to the left cervical and mandibular region. The wound depth had reached the carotid artery and jugular vein. Zarya's friends flew back to Toronto with her body in the cargo hold, and none of them have gone into the ocean since. I can't believe she had read all the research on shark behavior before leaving home, which makes her death not ignorance but overconfidence. And that's somehow even dumber. Somewhat similarly, this next guy had spent years in the water with sharks, and that's exactly what made him more dangerous to himself. It was September 3rd, 2016, roughly 2 miles off the north shore of Oahu, Hawaii. That day, there was a shape moving in the water, and a man had been methodically building toward the worst decision of his life for the better part of a decade. Nico Darrow was 47, self-employed, and spent most of his working hours in the water, whether he was being paid to be there or not. He ran a one-man boat repair operation out of Haleiwa, was known on the docks as someone who finished jobs on time and charged fairly, and had a reputation for knowing the local waters better than people who made their living on them. Diving was not a weekend hobby for him. He logged between 200 and 300 dives a year, mostly reef dives along Oahu's north shore, and had been doing so consistently since his late 20s. What had changed in recent years was his framing of those dives. Nico had developed a working theory, shared across several diving forums and a personal blog he updated inconsistently, that shark behavior could be modulated by a diver's posture, movement rate, and sustained eye contact. Now, according to his friends, he had spent years documenting close interactions with white-tip and black-tip reef sharks and had accumulated enough incident-free encounters to treat his theory as confirmed rather than speculative. He called it calibrated presence. Other divers in his circle called it something else behind his back. The site group had selected that morning was a known aggregation point for tiger sharks. Tiger sharks are the second most dangerous shark species in documented human attacks. Adults regularly exceed 11 feet and 1,000 pounds, with bite forces sufficient to sever limbs and crush bone in a single closure. Before entering the water, the charter operator briefed the group of 5 on shark safety. A reef guide noted that a large female tiger shark had been seen in the area days earlier and advised maintaining distance and proper positioning if encountered. About 18 minutes into the dive, a tiger shark appeared at roughly 50 feet, circling within about 30 feet of the group. Witnesses later estimated it was an adult female measuring around 12 to 13 feet long. The 4 experienced divers held position, maintained vertical orientation, and created deliberate space by moving slowly rearward as a tight, coordinated group. Nico did not. His GoPro, recovered later, captured him narrating to the camera in real time, describing the shark's body language as non-threatening, her circling pattern as measured and communicative, and his own decision to move toward her as an extension of his established methodology. He closed to within 8 feet and extended his left arm toward her snout. The shark turned in under a second and seized his forearm. The torque from her initial bite spun him 90 degrees in the water column. The GoPro captured the rotation as a blur of reef, surface light, and then nothing recognizable. He attempted to pull the arm back. The shark released, circled for approximately 4 seconds, and returned. The second bite landed across the left chest and shoulder, and the compression was sufficient to register on the audio track of the GoPro as a low, muffled impact and heavy vibration before the footage dissolved into bubbles and erratic movement. Witnesses described blood and tissue becoming visible in the water column almost immediately after the second bite. 2 divers used camera housings and fins to strike at the shark's head and flanks, creating enough interruption for a third diver to pull Nico upward while the shark held distance. His arm below the elbow was not recoverable. The charter vessel reached him within 4 minutes of surfacing. The Coast Guard arrived approximately 25 minutes later, but by then he had lost significant amounts of blood and died. Death was ultimately ruled accidental, and the GoPro footage was never posted publicly. Here's the thing. You don't spend years learning about shark behavior just to ignore every rule and stick your hand at a 12-foot tiger shark. That's not confidence. That's a man so in love with his own theory that he forgot the shark never read his block. And if you think that guy is stupid, well, let's top it off with this next story. It was May 11th, 2018, nautical miles off the coast of Nassau, Bahamas. Milo had built a career on being the calmest person in situations everyone else feared. That persona would only hold for 6 full minutes of treading water before the 4th pass. Milo Renner, 24, was based in Tempe, Arizona, and ran a small YouTube channel focused on challenging common beliefs about dangerous animals and outdoor survival. Though not a biologist, he had built an online persona around projecting confidence in risky situations. The Bahamas trip was intended as a multi-part video series. Milo chartered a private offshore vessel and told viewers he planned to enter open water near oceanic white-tipped sharks to demonstrate his belief that calm, non-bleeding swimmers were unlikely to be targeted by the animals. What Milo had was partial information used in service of a conclusion he had already reached. Oceanic white-tips are a pelagic species, meaning they live in open ocean, far from the reef systems most recreational divers encounter. They are not the largest sharks, typically reaching 6 to 8 feet and roughly 150 to 375 pounds. The species has been implicated in more open ocean fatalities than its size would suggest, largely because encounters happen far from shore, far from help, and often involve people who are already compromised. The crew consisted of a father and his 19-year-old son, operators of a Nassau charter business with decades of offshore experience. The son later told maritime authorities that his father had repeatedly warned Milo about the deep water and the presence of oceanic white-tip sharks in the area before he entered the water. At one point, the son even tried to stop him from going overboard, but Milo brushed aside the warning and entered the water with a waterproof camera rig. The recovered footage runs for 11 minutes and 22 seconds. The camera became separated from Milo during the incident, but the floating housing was later recovered and the memory card remained readable. For the first 6 minutes, Milo treads water, gesturing outward at the open ocean. He exaggerates his leg kicks multiple times, a move consistent with his stated belief that vibration and visual disruption test whether sharks will approach. A dorsal fin becomes visible in frame at the 6-minute mark, at a distance of approximately 40 yards. Milo sees it, but he does not leave water. Instead, he keeps performing. The shark makes 4 passes. This is not unusual for the species oceanic whitetips, characteristically circle and close distance incrementally. The passes narrow with each circuit. By the 3rd pass, the fin is within 15 yards. The crew can be heard yelling from the boat. Milo's narration becomes shorter between sentences. On the 4th pass, the shark submerges approximately 20 feet out. What happens next takes less than 4 seconds. The camera captures a sudden disturbance and a brief flash of pale underside beneath the surface before the frame becomes completely obscured by white water. The audio contains 2 distinct sounds, a dull, dense impact, and then Milo's voice, not screaming, just stopping. The recording ends there. The son, who was watching from the stern, later described seeing the water go red across a wide radius before surface disturbances continued for an interval he estimated between 90 seconds and 2 minutes. Then nothing. A distress call was placed immediately. Search vessels arrived within 40 minutes. The recovered items were a floating camera housing and a foam flotation collar. Nothing else. Witness accounts and recovered footage were consistent with a shark attack event. No remains were recovered. In the aftermath, the father sold the boat for roughly a third of its value the following October. 40 years of a family business gone. His son stopped going offshore entirely. They were doing their jobs. They told him not to go in. None of that mattered in the end. And I think this is the part of the story that deserves to sit with me. Not the shark, not the video, but 2 people who watched it happen and had to carry it home. Meanwhile, in the next story, we look at blind heroism in action, proving that it's a lot closer to stupidity than he thought. It was May 21st, 2013, somewhere in the central Indian Ocean, roughly 340 miles from the nearest shipping lane. 3 men sat on an orange life raft under the sun, and one of them had spent the last 40 minutes watching something move just beneath the surface, deciding he was going to do something about it. Joren John Heinbinder was 33 and had worked cargo vessels since age 19. He had sailed out of Mombasa, Colombo, and Jakarta, rotating between bulk freighters and container ships, building a career defined by reliability over ambition. His goal was simple: 2 contracts away from enough saving to open a small equipment rental business in rural Georgia. His family knew the plan. The mid-sized dry bulk carrier suffered catastrophic hull damage during an unseasonal storm system that moved faster than forecast. The ship listed heavily within 90 minutes and was abandoned. Joren and 2 crewmates, Filipino engineer Dante and Yemeni deckhand Samir, reached a secondary raft. They had 2 days of rations, limited fresh water, a handheld radio that stopped transmitting within 3 hours, and an emergency position indicating beacon that remained unactivated under the assumption the ship's distress systems were still working. An oceanic white-tip shark appeared around midday, circling in wide arcs beneath and beside the raft. Dante and Samir observed it in silence at first, believing that speaking about it would draw more attention to it. The oceanic whitetip is not a coastal animal. They do not ambush in the manner of a great white. They are persistent, investigative, and capable of sustaining interest in a potential food source for hours. When food is scarce in the open ocean, which it almost always is, an oceanic whitetip does not leave. By the third hour, it circled closer, occasionally bumping the raft hard enough to shift their weight. Samir, experienced in open water sailing, recognized the white-tipped dorsal and rounded snout as a white-tipped shark. He told the others to stay still and keep their hands out of the water. There was no ranger station, no warning system, only Samir's repeated instructions and Dante's agreement. By hour 5, the combined heat stress, exhaustion, and dehydration were looking like it was affecting Joran's judgment. His lips were split, he had stopped producing saliva, he had also become fixated. He told the others that the shark was only still there because they were passive, that if someone went in and grabbed it, forced contact, it would register them as a threat and leave. Dante told him that was not how it worked. Samir told him to sit down. Joran sat down. Then the shark made another slow pass, barely 3 feet from the edge of the raft, its dorsal breaking the surface, and Joran went in. He entered feet first on the left side. Witnesses said he got both hands around the caudal fin for less than 2 seconds before the shark accelerated hard and pulled away, dragging him forward and submerging him briefly. He came up coughing. For approximately 8 seconds, nothing happened. Then it came from directly below. The first strike severely damaged and partially removed his left calf. The bite was not a test, it was a full compression, and the shark shook twice before releasing. Joran screamed and tried to swim back to the raft. Dante reached for his arm. The shark returned before Joran reached the raft edge. The second strike hit the right thigh. The third, around 40 seconds later, caught his left hip as Dante and Samir were pulling him up by both arms. He was partially over the side when the fourth bite reached his lower abdomen. The blood loss at that point was visible in the water, a spreading dark stain the color of rust. His crewmates got him mostly aboard. He was conscious for a short time, then not. Samir activated the beacon. A merchant vessel arrived around 6 hours and 15 minutes later. Joran Vale had been dead for approximately 2 of those hours. His surviving crewmates gave statements to maritime investigators in Colombo 3 weeks later. There is not much to say about Joran's decision that his crewmates did not already say while it was happening. He was told. He knew the shark was there. The ocean does not negotiate. An oceanic white tip does not scare. I think people need more proof on how unforgiving the ocean is. Perhaps this last story will do just that. It was March 14, 2014, on the northern stretch of Boa Viagem Beach in Recife, Brazil, and by the time the ambulance crew reached the sand, there was already so much blood soaked into it. Taryn Fiska was 51 years old, a construction site supervisor from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who had spent the better part of 2 decades managing crews on commercial build. He was visiting his cousin's family in Recife for 10 days. The beach was his cousin's idea, and Taryn was okay with it, as long as a drink was in his hand. By late afternoon, the group had been on the beach for several hours. Taryn had been drinking steadily since around 2 o'clock local beer, then something stronger, and was, by multiple accounts from his cousin and 2 other friends present, visibly intoxicated well before sunset. He was loud, in good spirits, and not paying attention to anything structural about his environment. That part was out of character for the man who, at work, never stopped reading a site. Boa Viagem is not an incidentally dangerous beach. It is one of the most statistically dangerous shark beaches in the world. The municipal authority had posted warning signs at multiple access points along the stretch where Taryn's group had set up. Taryn's cousin later told investigators that they had acknowledged the warnings briefly and moved on. There was a verbal exchange about the water being off limits, and Taryn had agreed without particular interest. As the afternoon went on and the drinking continued, the signs became furniture present but unprocessed. Around 6:40 p.m., as the light was dropping and the surf had turned opaque with the churn of tide and sediment, Taryn told the group he needed to use the restroom. His cousin pointed toward the facilities up the beach. Taryn was already walking toward the water. He waded in to roughly waist depth, maybe 15 feet from shore. He had been standing there for less than 2 minutes when the group on the beach heard him shout. Bull sharks use the nearshore zone there with regularity, particularly after dark and in low visibility water conditions. They are not deep water animals. They hunt in murky, shallow surf, and they are capable of rapid, explosive strikes in water no deeper than a man's waist. The shark made initial contact with his left thigh, described by witnesses as a bump and a sudden lurch in his posture. He did not go under. He turned toward shore and began moving, stumbling on the uneven sand bottom, and had covered maybe 6 feet when the shark immediately reapproached in a short burst and bit again at the same leg. The second bite was lower and held briefly. Witnesses described him twisting and losing balance into the water before regaining partial footing. He made it into the shallows but collapsed at the waterline as blood loss rapidly compromised his ability to stand, and his cousin and a friend dragged him the remaining distance onto dry sand. The wound to his upper left thigh was severe, with extensive tissue loss and catastrophic damage to the femoral artery, causing massive arterial bleeding. A nearby lifeguard unit reached him before EMS arrival and attempted direct pressure and a makeshift tourniquet, but the hemorrhage remained uncontrolled. Ambulance crews arrived about 35 minutes later, delayed by beach access congestion and heavy crowds on the sand. Despite continued efforts to control the bleeding during transport, the injury was unsurvivable. Tehran Fiska was pronounced dead at 7:58 p.m. after suffering irreversible hemorrhagic shock in the hospital. He was not a reckless man by nature. He built things carefully for a living. Alcohol removes the part of the person that reads the room, and on that beach, the room had warnings on every wall.